My father looked me dead in the eye across the mahogany dining table and said, "I wish you were never born." The whole room erupted in laughter. Jennifer nearly choked on her wine. David slapped the table like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. My mother just smiled into her napkin. But I didn't laugh. I didn't cry either. I stood up, walked to the corner of that pristine dining room, and placed something on the marble side table. Something they didn't expect. Something that would turn their smug smiles into silence so thick you could cut it with the sterling silver knife still resting beside my untouched plate. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The invitation came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was grading spelling tests at the kitchen table when Tyler walked in from school and dropped the mail beside my coffee mug. Most of it was junk, grocery store flyers, credit card offers, a postcard from a dental office I'd never been to. But one envelope stood out. Cream-colored, expensive paper. My name written in that sharp, slanted handwriting I recognized immediately. My hands went cold before I even opened it. Inside was a single card with gold-embossed lettering. You are cordially invited to celebrate Robert Carter's 65th birthday. A family dinner at the estate. Your presence is requested. I read it 3 times, searching for warmth in the words and finding none. It had been 12 years since I'd set foot in that house. 12 years since I walked out of Carter and Associates with a cardboard box full of desk supplies and a heart full of something I couldn't name yet. Back then I thought leaving meant failure. I thought walking away from the family business, from the legacy my father built, from the life they said I was supposed to want, meant I was weak. But sitting in my small Seattle apartment with Tyler's sneakers by the door, and the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, I knew better now. I'd left because staying would have killed me. Not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece, smile by smile, until there was nothing left of Emma Carter except the version of her they wanted to see. Tyler noticed me staring at the card. He leaned against the counter, backpack still slung over one shoulder, and asked quietly, "What is it?" I didn't answer right away. I just kept turning the card over in my hands like it might reveal some hidden message, some clue that this wasn't what it seemed. "It's from your grandfather," I finally said. "He wants me to come to his birthday dinner." Tyler's expression didn't change much. He'd only met my father twice. Once when he was 4 and didn't remember, and once when he was 10 and remembered too much. That was the visit where my father looked at Tyler across the lawn and said to Jennifer, "It's a shame Emma never gave him any structure. The boy's soft." Tyler hadn't asked to go back after that. He didn't ask now either. He just looked at me with those steady brown eyes, the ones that always made him seem older than 16, and said, "Are you going to go?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wanted to throw the invitation in the trash and pretend it never arrived. But another part of me, the part that still remembered being 7 years old and sitting on my father's lap while he sketched building designs, the part that remembered when he used to call me his little architect, that part wanted to believe this was real. That maybe, after all these years, he'd finally decided to reach out. That maybe this was an olive branch. I spent the next 2 days going back and forth. I told myself it didn't matter. That I didn't need his approval or his acknowledgement. I'd built a good life without them. Tyler was thriving. He was on the honor roll, played varsity soccer, volunteered at the food bank on weekends. I had a job I loved, working with kids who needed patience and kindness, things I'd learned the hard way. I had friends. I had peace. I didn't need to walk back into that house and subject myself to their judgment. But on Thursday night, Tyler sat down beside me on the couch and said something that changed everything. "Mom, you've spent 12 years wondering if you made the right choice. Maybe this is your chance to stop wondering. Maybe you need to go back, not for them but for you, so you can finally close that door." He was right. I hated that he was right, but he was. I called the number on the invitation the next morning and told Patricia, my mother, that I'd be there. Her response was clipped, polite, distant. "Wonderful. Dinner is at 7. Don't be late." And that was it. No "how have you been?" no "we've missed you, just don't be late," like I was an employee confirming a meeting. The drive from Seattle to Portland took 3 hours, but it felt longer. Tyler came with me. I didn't ask him to. He just threw his duffel bag in the backseat Saturday morning and said, "You're not doing this alone." The whole way down I kept replaying memories. The good ones and the bad ones. I remembered Sunday mornings in my father's office, watching him draft blueprints by hand before everything went digital. I remembered him teaching me about load-bearing walls and natural light and how a building should make people feel something. I remembered thinking he was the smartest man in the world. But I also remembered the night I told him I wanted to leave the firm. I was 26. I'd been working there for 4 years and I was miserable. The projects I was assigned were repetitive. My ideas were dismissed. Jennifer and David, who'd both joined the firm after college, were given lead roles on major builds, while I was stuck drafting bathroom layouts for mid-range condos. When I finally worked up the courage to tell my father I was thinking about leaving, maybe going back to school, maybe trying something different, he looked at me like I just spit on his legacy. "You're being selfish," he said. "This family built something and you want to throw it away because you're bored." I tried to explain. I tried to tell him it wasn't about boredom. It was about feeling invisible. About being passed over again and again while my siblings were celebrated for half the work. But he didn't want to hear it. He just shook his head and said, "If you leave, don't expect to come back." So I left. And I didn't come back. Not when my mother called 6 months later and said, "Your father's asking about you." Not when Jennifer sent a cold email saying we're moving forward on the Riverside project. Thought you'd want to know, as if I'd care. Not even when Uncle Frank tracked me down and said, "Emma, he's stubborn, but he's your dad. Give it time." I didn't give it time. I gave it distance. I got a job working part-time at a bookstore. I went back to school and got a teaching certificate. I met a man named Aaron who was kind and patient, and for a little while I thought maybe I'd found something good. But Aaron left when Tyler was 2. Not because he didn't love us, he said, but because he wasn't ready to be a father. I didn't blame him. I didn't have the energy to. I just kept going. I worked 2 jobs. I moved into a smaller apartment. I learned how to do Tyler's hair and pack his lunches and show up to parent-teacher conferences alone while other families came in pairs. And somewhere along the way, I stopped waiting for my father to call. I stopped hoping he'd apologize. I stopped needing him to. But here I was driving back to Portland, my hands tight on the steering wheel, my son beside me eating gas station pretzels and scrolling through his phone like this was just another Saturday. When we finally pulled up to the estate, my stomach twisted. The house looked exactly the same. Tall, stately, wrapped in ivy and privilege, sitting on 2 acres of manicured lawn like a monument to everything the Carter family wanted the world to see. There were already several cars in the driveway. Jennifer's white Range Rover. David's black Tesla. A few others I didn't recognize, probably colleagues or family friends invited to make the evening feel more like a celebration, and less like what it really was. A performance. Tyler looked at the house and let out a low whistle. "This is where you grew up." I nodded. He shook his head slowly. "No wonder you left." We sat in the car for another minute. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to drive back to Seattle and pretend this whole thing never happened. But then I saw the front door open, and my mother stepped out onto the porch. She was wearing a pale blue dress, pearls at her neck, hair styled perfectly. She looked exactly like she always did. Composed. Untouchable. She didn't wave. She just stood there waiting. I took a breath, opened the car door, and stepped out into the cold November air. Patricia greeted us at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Emma," she said, her voice smooth and practiced. "You look well. Thank you for coming." I wanted to say something real. I wanted to ask her why she never called, why she let 12 years pass without a single conversation. But I didn't. I just said, "Thanks for having us." She glanced at Tyler. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And her expression softened slightly, though it was hard to tell if it was genuine or just good manners. "Tyler, you've grown so much." He nodded politely. "Hi, Mrs. Carter." She gestured for us to come inside. "Everyone's in the dining room. Your father's been looking forward to this." I doubted that. But I followed her anyway, through the grand foyer with its crystal chandelier and marble floors, past the sitting room where nothing had changed, same furniture, same paintings, same suffocating sense of everything being in its place. The dining room was at the back of the house, overlooking the gardens. The table was set with fine china, candles flickering in silver holders, wine glasses already filled. Jennifer and David were already seated. Jennifer looked up when I walked in, and her smile was sharp. Well, well, she said, leaning back in her chair. Look who decided to show up. David smirked. Didn't think you'd actually come. I didn't respond. I just took the seat my mother gestured to, near the end of the table. Tyler sat beside me, quiet and observant. My father entered a moment later. Robert Carter at 65 looked older than I remembered but not frail. His hair had gone mostly gray, but his posture was still straight, his presence still commanding. He looked around the table, his gaze passing over me without pause, and said, "Let's eat." Dinner started civilly enough. There was small talk about the firm, about a new project downtown, about Jennifer's recent promotion to senior partner. David talked about a client he'd landed, some tech startup that wanted a custom office space. Patricia asked polite questions and poured more wine. I stayed quiet. I cut my food into small pieces and chewed slowly, trying to disappear into the background. Tyler did the same, but I could feel it building. That familiar tension, the kind that used to fill our family dinners when I was younger. The kind that meant someone was about to say something cruel disguised as a joke. It was Jennifer who started it. "So Emma," she said, swirling her wine glass. "What are you doing these days? Still working at that bookstore?" I met her eyes. "I'm a teacher's aide now. I work with elementary school kids." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, how nice. That must be so fulfilling." Her tone made it clear she thought the opposite. David chimed in. "I heard you're living in Seattle now. How's that going?" "It's good," I said simply. He nodded slowly, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Must be hard, making it work on your own." I didn't take the bait. Tyler's hand found mine under the table, a small squeeze. I squeezed back. My father hadn't said anything yet. He just sat at the head of the table, cutting his steak with precise movements, his face unreadable. Then Jennifer leaned forward, her smile too sweet. "Emma, I always wondered, do you ever regret it?" "Regret what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "Leaving," she said. "Walking away from everything Dad built. From the family. From your future." I felt my jaw tighten. "No," I said quietly. "I don't." David laughed. "Come on. You're telling me you don't ever think about what you could have had? You could have been a partner by now. You could have been designing real buildings instead of babysitting other people's kids." The air in the room shifted. Tyler's grip on my hand tightened. I kept my voice steady. "I'm proud of what I do." Jennifer scoffed. "Proud? Emma, you threw away a career most people would kill for. And for what? To prove a point?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years I didn't feel small. "I left because I wasn't happy. That's all." David shook his head. "That's the problem with your generation. You think happiness matters more than responsibility. You think feelings are more important than legacy." Before I could respond, my father's voice cut through the room like a blade. "You were always weak, Emma." I looked at him. He was staring right at me now, his expression hard. "You couldn't handle the pressure, so you ran. You abandoned your family because things got difficult. And now you show up here after 12 years expecting what? Forgiveness? A second chance?" I felt my throat close up. I wanted to say something. I wanted to defend myself. But the words wouldn't come. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze cold and unwavering. "Honestly, Emma, sometimes I think my life would have been easier if you were never born." The room went silent. Then Jennifer started laughing. A sharp, high sound that echoed off the walls. David joined in, shaking his head like my father had just told the best joke he'd ever heard. Even Patricia, my own mother, smiled faintly into her napkin. But I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling something inside me finally snap into place. And then slowly I stood up. I walked slowly to the corner of the dining room where a marble side table stood beneath an ornate mirror. My hands were steady as I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder I'd been carrying since we left Seattle. The laughter died down as everyone watched me, confused, curious, still smug. I placed the folder on the table with a soft thud that seemed to echo louder than it should have. Then I turned to face them all, my father at the head of the table, Jennifer with her wine glass halfway to her lips, David leaning back with that infuriating smirk still plastered on his face, and my mother, silent as always, her hands folded in her lap like she was watching a play she'd seen before. You want to know what I've been doing for the past 12 years, I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. You want to know if I regret leaving? If I think about what I gave up? The answer is no. But I do think about what I learned. And I learned that family isn't about legacy or business or whose name is on the building. It's about showing up. It's about caring when no one's watching. It's about doing the right thing even when it costs you something. Jennifer set her glass down. Emma, what are you talking about? I ignored her and kept my eyes on my father. Do you remember Mrs. Rodriguez? I asked him. Our old neighbor. The one who used to bring over tamales every Christmas. The one whose husband died about 8 years ago. My father's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Of course I remember Helen, he said dismissively. What does that have to do with anything? Everything, I said. Because when Mr. Rodriguez died, Helen couldn't afford to keep up with her mortgage payments. She was drowning in medical debt from his cancer treatment. She was about to lose the house she'd lived in for 30 years. Do you remember that? He shifted slightly in his chair. I wasn't aware of her financial troubles. That's because you never asked, I said. But I knew. Because Helen called me one night, desperate, not knowing where else to turn. She knew I'd left the family, but she remembered me as that little girl who used to help her water her garden. So she called. And I helped her. David laughed. You helped her how? You were barely making rent yourself. I worked out a payment plan with her bank, I said. I contacted a nonprofit that helps seniors with housing. I spent 6 months making phone calls, filling out paperwork, finding resources. And when it still wasn't enough, I sent her money. Every month for 3 years. Not much, but enough to bridge the gap until she qualified for assistance. The room had gone quiet again, but this time it was different. Tyler was looking at me with something like pride in his eyes. Patricia's face had gone pale. Jennifer was frowning, trying to figure out where this was going. And my father, he was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. That's very noble, Jennifer said slowly. But what does that have to do with us? I picked up the folder from the side table and opened it. Inside were bank statements, printed emails, copies of checks and letters. All documentation of every single transaction, every bit of correspondence, every sacrifice I'd made not just for Helen, but for others too. Because Helen wasn't the only one. There was Marcus, the teenager from my neighborhood who needed help with college applications because his parents didn't speak English. I spent every Saturday for a year helping him write essays, fill out financial aid forms, practice for interviews. He's at University of Washington now, studying engineering. There was Sarah, a single mother at the community center where I volunteered, who needed someone to watch her kids while she went to night school. I did that for 2 years. She's a registered nurse now. There was the family who lost everything in a house fire. I organized a fundraiser that brought in $8,000. I showed them the papers, laying them out on the table one by one. These are the things I've been doing while you've all been busy building your empire and counting your money. David stood up, his face flushed. Okay, so you're a saint. Congratulations. What's your point? My point, I said, looking directly at my father, is that you taught me everything I know about architecture. About structure and foundation and making something that lasts. But you forgot to teach me the most important part. That buildings are for people. That legacy means nothing if it's built on cruelty and neglect. That you can have your name on every skyscraper in the city and still be poor in every way that matters. My father's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, I said. Because I watched you for 26 years. I watched you prioritize work over family. I watched you miss birthdays and recitals and graduations because you were too busy. I watched you treat mom like a decoration and your children like employees. And I watched you look at me, your youngest daughter, and see nothing but disappointment because I dared to want something different. Patricia finally spoke, her voice thin and strained. Emma, that's not fair. Isn't it? I turned to her. Mom, when was the last time you asked me how I was doing? When was the last time you called just to talk? When was the last time you chose me over keeping the peace with him? She didn't answer. She just looked down at her plate, her hands trembling slightly. Jennifer stood up now too, her face tight with anger. You have a lot of nerve coming in here after 12 years and acting like you're better than us. I never said I was better than you, I replied. I said I made different choices. Choices that let me sleep at night. Choices that taught my son what it means to be a good person instead of just a successful one. David slammed his hand on the table. You want to talk about your son? Let's talk about how you're raising him in a cramped apartment with no father and no future. Let's talk about how you're teaching him that it's okay to quit when things get hard. Tyler stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. The sound cut through the room like a crack of thunder. Don't talk about my mom like that, he said, his voice low but steady. You don't know anything about us. You don't know what she's sacrificed or how hard she's worked or how much she's given to people who never gave her anything back. David looked at Tyler like he was noticing him for the first time. Kid, you don't understand how the world works. I understand enough, Tyler shot back. I understand that my mom is worth 10 of any of you. I understand that she chose kindness over money and love over legacy. And I understand that I'd rather live in our apartment and be happy than live in this museum and be miserable like all of you clearly are. Jennifer gasped. How dare you? How dare I? Tyler said. How dare you? You invited us here just so you could tear her down again. You laughed when your own father said he wished she was never born. What kind of people do that? The silence that followed was suffocating. Patricia had tears in her eyes now, but she didn't move. Jennifer looked like she'd been slapped. David sat back down slowly, his face red. And my father, he was staring at Tyler with an expression that might have been surprise or might have been something else entirely. I put my hand on Tyler's shoulder. It's okay, I said softly. We're leaving. But before I could turn toward the door, my father spoke. Wait. His voice was quiet but firm. I stopped but didn't turn around. You think you know everything, he said. You think leaving made you righteous. But you don't know the whole story, Emma. I turned slowly to face him. Then tell me. He looked at me for a long moment, and for the first time all evening, I saw something crack in his facade. Something that looked almost like regret. 8 years ago, he said slowly, I got a call from Helen Rodriguez. She told me what you'd been doing. How you'd helped her save her home. How you'd been sending her money even though you were struggling yourself. I didn't say anything. My heart was pounding. She called to thank me, he continued. She thought I was the one helping her. She thought I'd sent you to do it because she couldn't reach me directly. She went on and on about what a good man I was, how proud I must be of my daughter, how the Carter family legacy was really about helping people. And I didn't correct her. I just let her believe it. Jennifer's eyes widened. Dad, you never told us that. Because I was ashamed, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I was ashamed that my daughter, the one I'd pushed away, the one I'd told wasn't good enough, was out there doing more good with nothing than I'd ever done with everything. I felt something twist in my chest, but I didn't let it show on my face. If you knew, I said quietly, why didn't you ever reach out? Why didn't you tell me? He looked away. Because I'm a stubborn old man who didn't know how to admit he was wrong. Because every month that passed made it harder. Because I watched you from a distance through Helen, through Frank, through the few people who still kept in touch with you. And I saw you building a life I didn't understand but couldn't deny was good. And it terrified me. Terrified you, I repeated. Why would that terrify you? Because it meant I was wrong about everything, he said. His voice barely above a whisper. It meant that success isn't just about buildings and bank accounts. It meant that maybe the daughter I pushed away was the strongest one all along. And it meant I'd lost 12 years with you because I was too proud to say I'm sorry. The words hung in the air like smoke. David and Jennifer were both staring at him in shock. Patricia had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Tyler was looking at me, waiting to see what I would do. And I felt 12 years of anger and hurt and loneliness rising up in my throat like a wave. You're right, I said, my voice shaking now. You were wrong. About me. About what matters. About everything. And your apology, if that's what this is, it's 12 years too late. I picked up my purse and took Tyler's hand. But before I could take a step toward the door, my father stood up. Emma, please. Just listen. I stopped but didn't turn around. After Helen called me, he said, I started looking into what you were doing. I hired someone to find out. Not to spy on you, but because I needed to know if what Helen said was true. If you really were out there making a difference. And what I found, it humbled me. The investigator showed me everything. How you worked 2 jobs while going to school. How you volunteered at the community center every weekend. How you helped Marcus get into college, how you supported Sarah through nursing school. How you organized that fundraiser for the family who lost their home. He showed me letters from people you'd helped. Testimonials from teachers who said you were the best aide they'd ever worked with. Photos of you at Tyler's soccer games, at school events, at fundraisers, always smiling, always present, always there. And then I saw something else, he continued. I saw the financial records. I saw how little you were making and how much you were giving away. I saw that you'd been living paycheck to paycheck for years because you kept putting others first. And I realized something. You didn't leave because you were weak. You left because you were the only one strong enough to walk away from something that was killing you. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. If you realized all of this 8 years ago, I said, my voice tight, then why did you wait until now? Why did you let me think you still hated me? Why did you invite me here just to humiliate me one more time? I didn't invite you here to humiliate you, he said. I invited you here to do what I should have done years ago. He walked over to the sideboard and picked up a large envelope I hadn't noticed before. This is why I asked you to come tonight. He held it out to me. I didn't take it. What is that? I asked suspiciously. It's the deed to the building on Morrison Street, he said. The one we converted into the community center 5 years ago. The one you've been volunteering at. I stared at him. What are you talking about? The building was in foreclosure, he said. The nonprofit running it couldn't afford to keep it. I bought it. I've been keeping it running anonymously for the past 5 years, making sure they had funding, making sure the programs continued. Because I knew you volunteered there. Because I knew it mattered to you. And I wanted to do something, anything that might make up for what I'd done. My mind was reeling. You bought the community center. He nodded. And I'm signing it over to you. The building, the endowment I set up to maintain it, everything. It's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. Keep it as a community center, turn it into something else, sell it. I don't care. I just want you to have something that actually matters. I looked down at the envelope in his outstretched hand, then back up at his face. This doesn't fix anything, I said. I know, he replied. But maybe it's a start. Jennifer finally found her voice. Dad, you can't be serious. That building is worth over $2 million. I'm completely serious, he said, not taking his eyes off me. Your sister deserves it more than any of us. David stood up again. This is insane. She walked away from the family. She doesn't get to come back and take whatever she wants. She's not taking anything, my father said sharply. I'm giving it to her. Because unlike the two of you, she actually understands what it means to build something that matters. The room erupted. Jennifer started yelling about fairness and family protocol. David was shouting about legal implications and challenging the gift. Patricia was crying openly now, saying something about how this family was falling apart. And through it all, my father just stood there, holding out that envelope, waiting for me to take it. Tyler squeezed my hand. Mom, he whispered. It's okay. Whatever you want to do, it's okay. I looked at my son, this incredible person I'd somehow managed to raise despite everything. And I knew what I had to do. I took the envelope from my father's hand. But I didn't open it. Instead, I looked him directly in the eye and said, I'll accept this on one condition. He nodded slowly. Name it. You donate another $1 million to the community center endowment, I said. And you show up. Not just with money but with your time. I want you to volunteer there one Saturday a month for the next year. I want you to meet the people you're helping. I want you to understand why this matters. He looked stunned. $1 million in my time. That's the deal, I said. Take it or leave it. The room had gone silent again. Jennifer looked like she was about to explode. David was shaking his head in disbelief. But my father, after a long moment, smiled. It was a small, sad smile, but it was genuine. Deal, he said. And Emma, I am sorry. For everything. I nodded once, then turned and walked toward the door with Tyler beside me. As we reached the entrance to the dining room, I heard my mother's voice, small and broken. Emma, wait. I turned back. She was standing now, her napkin clutched in her hands, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry too, she said. I should have stood up for you. I should have called. I should have been your mother instead of just his wife. I'm so sorry. For a moment, I considered walking out without responding. Part of me wanted to. But then I thought about all those years of silence, all those nights I'd wished she would reach out, all those times I'd needed her and she hadn't been there. And I realized that carrying that anger was exhausting. You can call me now, I said quietly. If you want. My number hasn't changed. She nodded, more tears falling. I will. Promise I will. I didn't know if she would keep that promise. But I'd given her the chance, and that was all I could do. Tyler and I walked out of that house into the cold November night. The air felt crisp and clean after the suffocating atmosphere of the dining room. We got into the car and sat there for a moment in silence. That was intense, Tyler finally said. Yeah, I replied. It was. Are you okay, he asked. I thought about it. I thought about everything that had just happened, everything that had been said, everything that had changed and everything that hadn't. And I realized that I was okay. Better than okay, actually. I'm good, I told him. I'm really good. He smiled. That was pretty awesome what you did in there. You too, I said. The way you stood up for me, I'm proud of you. He shrugged, but I could see he was pleased. You've been standing up for people your whole life. I learned from the best. We drove back to Seattle that night instead of staying at the hotel I'd booked. I couldn't spend another minute in Portland. The whole drive home, I kept thinking about what my father had said, about the community center, about watching me from a distance, about finally realizing he was wrong. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wanted to think that maybe, after all these years, there could be some kind of reconciliation. But another part of me, the part that had survived 12 years without him, the part that had learned to build a life on my own terms, that part knew better than to hope too much. Actions mattered more than words. And time would tell if his actions matched his apology. When we got home, it was almost midnight. Tyler went straight to bed, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the evening. But I stayed up, sitting at the kitchen table with the envelope in front of me. I finally opened it. Inside was the deed to the building, just as he'd said, along with documentation of an endowment fund worth $1.5 million, and a handwritten note on my father's personal stationery. The note was brief. Emma, it read, I know this doesn't erase the past. I know I can't give you back the years I took from you. But I hope this shows you that I see you now. I see what you've built, who you've become, and the difference you've made. You were right to leave. You were right about everything. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that. I'll be at the community center the first Saturday of next month. I hope you'll be there too. Dad. I read the note 3 times, then set it down on the table. My hands were shaking. Not from anger or sadness, but from something I couldn't quite name. Relief, maybe. Or closure. Or just the simple recognition that after 12 years of silence, someone had finally said the words I'd needed to hear. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if my father would keep his promise to volunteer. I didn't know if my mother would actually call. I didn't know if Jennifer and David would ever speak to me again. And honestly, I wasn't sure I cared. What I did know was this. I had raised a son who knew how to stand up for what was right. I had built a life that meant something. I had helped people who needed help. And I had walked into that dining room, faced the people who'd made me feel small for so long, and walked out with my head held high. The next morning, I called Mrs. Rodriguez. Helen, I said when she answered. It's Emma Carter. Oh, Emma, she said warmly. How are you, sweetie? I haven't heard from you in a while. I'm good, I said. Really good, actually. Listen, I have something to tell you. I explained everything that had happened at the dinner, about my father's confession, about the community center, about the endowment. She was quiet for a long moment after I finished. You know, she finally said, her voice thick with emotion, I always knew you were special, Emma. Even when you were a little girl, I could see it. You had this light in you, this kindness. Your father, he's a complicated man. But I think maybe he's finally starting to see what I've always seen. Maybe, I said. We'll see. She chuckled softly. You're wise to be cautious. But Emma, can I tell you something? Of course. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you. It's about deciding that you're not going to let their mistakes take up any more space in your heart. You don't have to forget. You don't even have to let them back in. But you can let go of the anger. That's for you, not for them. Her words stayed with me long after we hung up. I thought about them while I made breakfast. I thought about them while Tyler and I went grocery shopping. I thought about them that night when I sat down to grade papers at the kitchen table. And I realized she was right. I'd spent 12 years carrying around the weight of my father's rejection, my family's judgment, my own sense of not being enough. And somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, I'd started to let some of that weight go. Not because they'd apologized, but because I'd proven to myself that I didn't need their approval to be worthy. That week, I went to the community center like I always did. I helped kids with their homework. I organized art supplies. I listened to Mrs. Chun talk about her grandson's soccer tournament. I watched Marcus, now a sophomore at UW, come in to mentor younger kids the way I'd once mentored him. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Contentment. Pure, simple contentment. On Wednesday, my phone rang. The caller ID said Patricia Carter. I stared at it for 3 rings before I answered. Hello, I said cautiously. Emma, my mother's voice was soft, hesitant. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. No, I said. It's fine. There was a pause. I wanted to hear your voice. I wanted to know if you meant what you said. About me calling. I did, I said. I meant it. She let out a shaky breath. I've thought about calling you so many times over the years, but I always talked myself out of it. I was afraid you'd hang up. I was afraid you hated me. I don't hate you, I said, and I realized as I said it that it was true. I was angry for a long time, but I don't hate you. I'm glad, she said quietly. Emma, I know I can't make up for not being there, but I'd like to try. If you'll let me. I don't know what that looks like, I said honestly. I don't either, she admitted. But maybe we could start small. Maybe coffee sometime. Or a phone call every now and then. I'd like to know my grandson. I'd like to know you. I felt something in my chest loosen. Okay, I said. We can try. Really, she sounded stunned, hopeful. Really, I confirmed. But Mom, I need you to understand something. I'm not that girl anymore. I'm not the daughter who's going to apologize for leaving or pretend the past didn't happen. If we're going to do this, we do it honestly. I understand, she said. I want that too. Honesty. Truth. Even if it's hard. Especially if it's hard, I said. She laughed, a small watery sound. You're so strong, Emma. You always were. I just couldn't see it. We talked for almost an hour. Not about anything deep or profound, just small things. She asked about Tyler's school, about my job, about Seattle. I asked about her garden, about Uncle Frank, about the book club she'd mentioned in passing years ago. It was awkward at times, stilted, full of pauses where neither of us knew quite what to say. But it was a start. When we hung up, I felt lighter somehow. Like I'd been holding my breath for 12 years and finally exhaled. Tyler came home from school that afternoon and found me smiling at my phone. Good news, he asked. Yeah, I said. Think it might be. That Saturday, I went to the community center early. I had a meeting with the director, a woman named Angela Martinez who'd been running the place for the past 7 years. I told her about the building deed and the endowment over the phone, and she'd cried so hard I thought she might pass out. Now, sitting across from her in her tiny office, I watched as she spread out plans and proposals she'd been dreaming about for years, but never had the funding to implement. We could expand the after-school program, she said, her eyes bright with excitement. We could hire more tutors, bring in art teachers, start a music program. We could offer GED classes for adults. We could do a job training program. Emma, do you realize what this means? We can actually help people. We already do help people, I reminded her gently. Now we can just help more of them. She laughed, wiping at her eyes. You're right. God, I can't believe this is real. It's real, I assured her. And there's more. I told her about my father's commitment to volunteer. About the additional $1 million he'd be donating. Her jaw dropped. Your father is Robert Carter. The Robert Carter from Carter and Associates. That's the one, I said dryly. And he's going to volunteer here. In person. She sat back in her chair, stunned. Emma, I don't know what to say. Say you'll put him to work, I suggested. Don't let him just write a check and disappear. Make him show up. Make him see what this place does. A slow smile spread across her face. Oh, I will. Trust me. I'll have him painting walls and organizing supply closets and reading to kindergartners. He won't know what hit him. Good, I said. That's exactly what he needs. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. My mother called twice a week, always at the same time. Always careful not to overstep but clearly wanting to be part of my life. We talked about small things mostly, but slowly, carefully we started talking about bigger things too. About the years of silence. About her regrets. About what it meant to be a mother and a wife and how she'd lost herself somewhere between the two. Jennifer sent me an email. It was short, formal, but it was something. Emma, it read. I owe you an apology. I've spent my whole life competing with you, trying to prove I was the better daughter, the more successful one. But watching you at Dad's dinner, seeing the way you've lived your life, I realize I wasn't competing with you at all. I was competing with an idea of success that doesn't actually mean anything. I don't expect us to be close. I don't even know if we can be. But I wanted you to know that I see you now. And I'm sorry for not seeing you sooner. Jennifer. I read the email 3 times, then wrote back a simple response. Thank you. That means more than you know. David never reached out. And that was okay. Some bridges are burned too thoroughly to rebuild. And some people aren't ready to change. I'd made my peace with that. The first Saturday of December, I arrived at the community center at 8 in the morning to find my father's car already in the parking lot. He was standing by the entrance wearing jeans and a plain sweater, looking more uncomfortable than I'd ever seen him. Emma, he said when he saw me. I wasn't sure what time to arrive. Angela said 8, so I came at 7:30 just to be safe. I almost smiled. That sounds like you. We walked inside together. Angela met us in the main room, clipboard in hand, energy radiating off her like electricity. Mr. Carter, she said, shaking his hand firmly. Welcome. Thank you for being here. He nodded, looking around the space with what I recognized as his architect's eye, taking in the layout, the lighting, the flow. It's a good building, he said. Solid bones. It is, Angela agreed. And today you're going to help us make it even better. We're repainting the children's reading room. I hope you don't mind getting your hands dirty. He looked startled for a moment, then nodded. Not at all. That's what I'm here for. I watched as Angela led him to the reading room, showed him the paint supplies, explained the vision for the space. I watched as he rolled up his sleeves and picked up a brush, his movements careful and precise, the same way he'd once taught me to draft blueprints. And I watched as a group of kids came running in, excited about the new paint colors, asking him questions, showing him their favorite books, completely oblivious to the fact that this man had once been too important, too busy, too focused on bigger things to spend time with his own children. By lunchtime, he had paint in his hair and on his jeans, and he was laughing at something one of the kids had said about dinosaurs. I brought him a bottle of water and he took it gratefully. This is harder than it looks, he admitted. But good. This is good. I nodded. These kids, they need places like this. People who show up. I know, he said quietly. I'm starting to understand that. We worked side by side for the rest of the afternoon. Not talking much, just painting, listening to the sounds of children playing and learning and being safe. And for the first time in 12 years I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were building something together. Something that mattered. When the sun started to set, the reading room gleamed with fresh coats of sky blue and cloud white. The kids had gone home, their laughter still echoing faintly in the hallways. Angela had left to handle administrative work in her office, and my father and I stood in the doorway of the newly painted room, surveying our work in silence. He looked tired but somehow younger than he had at the birthday dinner. Less rigid. More human. Thank you for coming, I said finally, for actually showing up. He turned to look at me, and there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Vulnerability, maybe, or just honesty without the armor he usually wore. I should be thanking you, he said, for giving me this chance. For not slamming the door in my face like I deserved. I almost did, I admitted. Walk away, I mean. At the dinner. Even after you apologized. I came this close. He nodded slowly. I know. And I wouldn't have blamed you. But you didn't. And I'm grateful. We stood there for another moment, the space between us filled with 12 years of hurt, and the beginning of something that might eventually look like healing. It's going to take time, I said. Whatever this is. I know, he replied. I'm not expecting miracles. I'm just asking for the chance to try. Fair enough, I said. But if you miss a Saturday, if you make excuses or send a donation instead of showing up, I'm done. No second chances this time. Understood, he said. I'll be here. Every first Saturday. You have my word. I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But another part, the part that had learned not to trust promises, remained cautious. Actions would prove whether his words meant anything. We walked out to the parking lot together as the streetlights began to flicker on. My father stopped by his car, keys in hand, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Would you, he started, then stopped, seeming to reconsider. Would you and Tyler want to have dinner sometime? Nothing formal. Maybe just pizza or something. Somewhere neutral. I thought about it. Thought about Tyler and whether this was something he'd want. Thought about whether I was ready to open that door any wider than I already had. Let me talk to Tyler, I said. If he's comfortable with it, then maybe. That's all I can offer right now. That's more than I deserve, he said quietly. I'll wait to hear from you. He got in his car and drove away, and I stood in the parking lot watching his taillights disappear into the December twilight. When I got home, Tyler was at the kitchen table doing homework, a half-eaten sandwich beside his textbook. How was it? He asked without looking up. Interesting, I said, dropping my purse on the counter. He actually showed up and painted for 6 hours. Tyler looked up, eyebrows raised. Seriously? Seriously, I confirmed. And he was good with the kids. Patient. Present. It was strange seeing him like that. Tyler set down his pencil. How do you feel about it? Confused, I admitted. Hopeful maybe. But also scared. Scared he'll disappoint you again, Tyler guessed. Yeah, I said. That. He nodded thoughtfully. Makes sense. You gonna give him another chance though? Think so, I said. He asked if we'd want to have dinner sometime. Just casual. Pizza or something. What do you think? Tyler leaned back in his chair, considering. I think he said slowly that it's okay to be careful. It's okay to take it slow. But I also think people can change if they really want to. And from what you've told me, it sounds like maybe he really wants to. You're pretty wise for 16, I told him. He grinned. I learned from someone pretty smart. We decided to wait a few weeks before agreeing to dinner. I wanted to see if my father would keep showing up at the community center, if his commitment was real or just a temporary burst of guilt-fueled effort. But he came the next month. And the month after that. Each time he worked without complaint. Painted walls, organized storage rooms, helped set up chairs for events, read stories to children during library hour. Angela told me he'd started asking questions about the programs, about what else the center needed, about how to make the space work better for the community. He's actually listening, she said one afternoon, sounding surprised. Like really listening. Not just nodding and waiting to talk. He asks follow-up questions. He takes notes. Emma, I think he's genuinely trying to understand. That's good, I said, still guarded but warming slightly to the idea that this might be real. In February, my mother started volunteering too. She didn't ask my permission. Just showed up one Saturday morning with a nervous smile and a bag of supplies she bought for the art program. I'm here to help, she said simply. If you'll have me. Angela put her to work immediately, and my mother, who'd spent decades hosting elaborate dinner parties and charity galas, found herself elbow-deep in finger paint and construction paper, helping 7-year-olds create Valentine's Day cards. She looked more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. At the end of the day, she approached me hesitantly. I know I should have asked first, she said. But I wanted to see what you've been doing here. I wanted to understand this part of your life. I'm glad you came, I said, and I meant it. She smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. Can I come back next month? You'll have to ask Angela, I said. She's the boss. But I think she'd be happy to have you. My mother did come back. And the month after that. Slowly, carefully, we began rebuilding something that resembled a relationship. It wasn't the mother-daughter bond I dreamed of as a child. It was quieter, more cautious, built on weekly phone calls and monthly volunteer shifts and small moments of honesty. But it was something. And something was more than I'd had in 12 years. In March, Tyler and I finally agreed to have dinner with my father. We chose a casual Italian place halfway between Portland and Seattle, neutral territory for everyone. My father arrived exactly on time, looking nervous in a way I'd never seen him. He shook Tyler's hand formally, then seemed to realize how stiff that was and pulled him into an awkward hug instead. It's good to see you, Tyler, he said. You too, Tyler replied, gracious as always. We sat down and the first few minutes were uncomfortable. Stilted small talk about the weather, about traffic, about the restaurant's bread. But then my father asked Tyler about school, about soccer, about his plans for college, and Tyler, generous soul that he was, answered openly and honestly. He talked about wanting to study social work, about being inspired by watching me volunteer, about wanting to help people the way his mom had taught him. My father really listened, and when Tyler finished he said quietly, "You're lucky to have her as your mother." "I know," Tyler said simply. "She's the best person I know." My father's eyes met mine across the table, and I saw something in them that looked like regret mixed with pride. "She is," he agreed. "I should have seen that sooner." The dinner lasted 2 hours. We talked about safe topics mostly, but toward the end my father asked if he could say something. We both nodded. "I know I can't change the past," he said. "I know I hurt you, Emma, in ways that apologies can't fix. But I want you to know that these past few months volunteering at the center, seeing the work you do, getting to know Tyler a little bit, it's changed me. Or maybe it's just helped me see what was always true. That I built my whole life around the wrong things. I thought legacy meant buildings and money and having my name on something permanent. But legacy is this." He gestured to Tyler. "It's raising a son who wants to help people. It's spending your time and energy making your community better. It's showing up when it matters. That's the legacy that lasts. And you built that, Emma. Not me. You." I felt my throat tighten. "Thank you," I managed to say. "For seeing that. For saying it." We left the restaurant that night with plans to do it again next month. Nothing was fixed. Nothing was perfect. But it was progress. Real tangible progress. And for now that was enough. Spring came to Seattle with cherry blossoms and longer days, and a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. The community center was thriving. With the new funding, Angela had been able to expand programs, hire additional staff, and create a scholarship fund for kids who wanted to pursue higher education but couldn't afford it. Marcus had been the first recipient, though he'd already been at UW for 2 years. The scholarship had helped him study abroad in Japan for a semester, an opportunity he never would have had otherwise. When he came back, he stopped by the center to thank me, to tell me about everything he'd seen and learned, to show me photos of temples and cities and moments that had changed his perspective. "None of this would have happened without you," he said. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." "You're going to make me cry," I told him, laughing. "Good," he said. "You've earned the right to cry happy tears." In April, Sarah, the single mother I'd helped years ago, brought her kids to the center. She was wearing scrubs, having just finished a shift at the hospital, but she'd wanted to stop by and show her children the place where she'd gotten help when she needed it most. "This is where Miss Emma used to watch you while I was in school," she told her daughter, who was now 8 years old. "And now I'm a nurse because people here cared enough to help." Her daughter looked at me with wide eyes. "You helped my mom." "I did," I said. "And now she helps lots of other people." "That's pretty cool," the little girl said seriously. Sarah hugged me before they left, whispering thank you again. For everything. These moments, these small confirmations that the choices I'd made had mattered, that the life I'd built had meaning, they sustained me in ways I couldn't fully articulate. They reminded me why I'd walked away from my father's world in the first place. Why I'd chosen kindness over prestige, community over career, love over legacy as it had been defined for me. In May, Jennifer reached out again. This time not through email but through a phone call. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Emma," she said when I picked up. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "No," I said cautiously. "It's fine." There was a pause. "I've been thinking a lot since Dad's birthday dinner. About what you said. About what Dad said. About all of it." "Okay," I said, not sure where this was going. "And I realized something," she continued. "I've spent my whole life trying to be what Dad wanted. The perfect daughter, the successful architect, the person who never questioned anything. And I'm miserable, Emma. I'm 42 years old and I don't know who I am outside of this job and this family and these expectations." I didn't know what to say to that. "I'm sorry" seemed inadequate. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," Jennifer went on. "Maybe because you're the only one who had the courage to walk away. The only one who chose yourself over what everyone expected. And I guess I wanted to know, how did you do it? How did you know it was the right choice?" I admitted. I didn't know if it was right. I just knew I couldn't keep living the way I was. I was drowning, Jennifer. And I had Tyler to think about. I had to show him what it looked like to choose yourself, to value your own happiness and mental health over other people's expectations, even if it meant losing everything else. "But you lost everything," she said quietly. "Your family, your career, your home. Wasn't that terrifying?" "It was the most terrifying thing I've ever done," I confirmed. "But you know what was more terrifying? The idea of staying. The idea of waking up 20 years later and realizing I'd lived someone else's life instead of my own. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. I think I'm starting to understand that. I've been so focused on being successful, on making Dad proud, on beating David to the next promotion, that I forgot to ask myself if this is what I actually want. So what do you want? I asked. I don't know, she said, and I could hear the vulnerability in her voice. That's the scariest part. I don't know. You'll figure it out, I told her. And Jennifer, you don't have to blow up your whole life to make changes. You don't have to do what I did. You just have to start being honest with yourself about what makes you happy. Thank you, she said softly, for not hanging up on me, for talking to me like I'm a person instead of just the sister who was awful to you. We all have our journeys, I said. Yours is just starting. Maybe we could have coffee sometime, she suggested. Just the two of us. No family drama, no agendas. Just coffee. I'd like that, I said, surprised to find that I meant it. We met for coffee 2 weeks later at a small cafe in Olympia, halfway between our two cities. It was awkward at first, neither of us sure how to talk to each other without the framework of family conflict. But slowly we found our way. She told me about her work, about a project she was actually excited about for the first time in years. I told her about Tyler's college applications, about his dream of studying social work. We talked about our mother, about how she was changing too, becoming softer, more present. And toward the end, Jennifer said something that surprised me. I envy you, Emma. You envy me, I repeated, genuinely shocked. You have millions of dollars in a corner office and everything you ever wanted. But I don't, she said. That's the point. I have everything Dad wanted for me. Not what I wanted. You had the courage to walk away and build something real. Something that matters to you. I'm just starting to realize I've been building someone else's dream. It's not too late, I told her. To figure out what you want. To make changes. She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. The same fear I'd felt 12 years ago when I packed up my car and drove away from everything I'd known. Change is terrifying, I said gently. But so is staying in a life that's killing you. Trust me on that. We finished our coffee and hugged goodbye. And I drove home thinking about how strange life was. How the people who'd once made me feel smallest were now looking to me for guidance. How the family that had rejected me was slowly, piece by piece, trying to find their way back. But more than that, I thought about how I'd survived. How I'd taken the worst rejection of my life and turned it into fuel. How I'd built something meaningful from nothing. How I'd raised a son who knew his worth and valued kindness over achievement. How I'd created a life that was mine, on my terms, full of purpose and connection and love. In June, Tyler graduated from high school. The ceremony was held at the football stadium on a bright, warm afternoon. I sat in the bleachers with my mother on one side and Mrs. Rodriguez on the other. Marcus was there too, having driven down from Seattle to support Tyler. And a few rows back, slightly separate but present, sat my father and Jennifer. They'd asked if they could come, and I told them it was Tyler's choice. He'd said yes. When Tyler walked across the stage to receive his diploma, I felt tears streaming down my face. My mother squeezed my hand. You did this, she whispered. You raised that incredible young man. We did it together, I said, looking at Tyler. He and I. We survived and we built something good. After the ceremony, Tyler found us in the crowd. He hugged me first, long and tight. Thanks, Mom, he said. For everything. For raising me right. For showing me what strength looks like. I'm so proud of you, I told him, my voice breaking. So incredibly proud. My father approached hesitantly, waiting for permission. Tyler saw him and walked over, extending his hand. My father took it, then pulled Tyler into a hug. Congratulations, he said. You've got a bright future ahead of you. Thanks, Grandpa, Tyler said. The word seemed to startle my father. He stepped back, eyes glistening. Grandpa, I like the sound of that. Me too, Tyler said with a smile. We all went out to dinner after, a big group including my mother, my father, Jennifer, Uncle Frank, Mrs. Rodriguez, and Marcus. It was chaotic and loud and occasionally awkward, but it was also joyful. Real. Human. At one point, my father stood up and clinked his glass with his fork. Everyone quieted down. I just want to say something, he began, looking uncomfortable but determined. Tyler, watching you graduate today reminded me of what matters. Not buildings or businesses or any of the things I spent my life chasing. But this. Family. Love. Being present for the people who matter. He turned to look at me. Emma, you tried to teach me that 12 years ago and I wasn't ready to hear it. I'm sorry it took me so long. I'm sorry for the years we lost. But I'm grateful for the chance to be here now. To be part of this. He raised his glass. To Tyler. To new beginnings. And to the strongest person I know, my daughter Emma. Everyone raised their glasses, and I felt something inside me finally settle. Not forgiveness exactly. The hurt was still there, probably always would be. But acceptance. The understanding that people were complicated, that families were messy, that healing wasn't linear or perfect or complete. It was just moving forward, one day at a time, choosing connection over resentment, hope over bitterness. That night, after everyone had gone home, Tyler and I sat on our small apartment balcony watching the stars. Summer stretched out ahead of us, full of possibility. In the fall, Tyler would start at the University of Washington, studying social work just like he'd planned. He'd gotten a full ride, a combination of academic scholarships and the fund my father had set up. You did good, Mom, Tyler said, breaking the comfortable silence. You built a good life for us. We built it together, I corrected. You were my reason for everything, Tyler. Every choice I made, every sacrifice, every hard day, it was all for you. And you turned out pretty amazing. So I think we both did good. He smiled. What are you going to do when I'm at school? You'll have all this free time. I laughed. Free time? I'll still be working. Still volunteering. Your grandpa and I are actually talking about starting a nonprofit together. Using his architecture expertise and my community connections to build affordable housing with integrated community spaces. Still in the early stages, but it could be something really meaningful. That's amazing, Tyler said. Look at you working with Grandpa. Who would have thought? Not me, I admitted. 6 months ago, I would have said it was impossible. But people surprise you sometimes. He nodded thoughtfully. Are you happy, Mom? The question caught me off guard. I thought about it, really thought about it. Was I happy? I had a modest apartment, a job that would never make me rich, a family that was still healing from years of dysfunction. But I also had a son I was proud of, work that mattered, relationships that were real, and a sense of peace I'd never had when I was living the life everyone else wanted for me. Yeah, I said. I really am. Are you? Me too, Tyler said. Thanks for showing me that happiness doesn't look like what everyone says it should. Thanks for teaching me that it's okay to build your own path, even if it's harder. We sat together in the quiet summer night, and I thought about how far we'd come. From that desperate escape 12 years ago with a baby in my arms and nowhere to go, to this moment, watching my son prepare to chase his dreams, surrounded by people who loved us, living a life that was authentically, beautifully ours. The years of silence and rejection and pain had been real. The hurt my father caused didn't disappear just because he apologized. The damage done by my family's judgment didn't erase itself overnight. But somewhere in the midst of all that darkness, I'd found something they never could have taught me. I'd learned that true strength wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up. It was about building something new from the broken pieces. It was about choosing love and kindness and purpose, even when the world told you to choose money and status and approval. My father had said at that terrible birthday dinner that he wished I'd never been born. Those words had cut deeper than anything else he could have said. But they'd also freed me in a strange way. They'd made it clear that I couldn't keep waiting for his validation, his acceptance, his love. I had to find those things in myself. And I had. In the weeks that followed that dinner, I'd stopped defining myself by his disappointment. I'd stopped measuring my worth by his standards. I'd stopped giving him power over my sense of self. And in doing so, I'd found something he'd been searching for his whole life and never found. Peace. Real, genuine, soul-deep peace. The kind that comes from knowing you're living in alignment with your values. The kind that lets you sleep at night. The kind that makes you smile at unexpected moments because you're grateful for the life you've built. Imperfect as it is. In August, a week before Tyler moved into his dorm, we had a small gathering at the community center. Angela had organized it as a send-off party, but it turned into something bigger. A celebration of everything the center had accomplished in the past year. All the lives that had been touched, all the families that had been helped. My father gave a speech that surprised everyone. A year ago, he said, I thought I knew what success looked like. I thought it was about buildings with my name on them, about profit margins and architectural awards. But then my daughter, who I'd pushed away, who I'd failed in every way that mattered, she gave me a chance to learn what success really means. He gestured around the room, at the artwork on the walls, the children playing, the families talking and laughing. This is success. Not the building itself, though it's structurally sound, he added with a small smile. But what happens inside these walls? The connections made, the help given, the community built. My daughter taught me that. And I'm grateful every day that she gave me the chance to learn. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Angela was crying. My mother was crying. Even Tyler, my stoic, composed son, was wiping at his eyes. I walked over to my father and hugged him. Not the stiff, obligatory hugs we'd exchanged at family functions when I was growing up, but a real hug. The kind that said, I see you trying, I see you changing, and that matters. Thank you, he whispered. For not giving up on me. Thank you for finally showing up, I whispered back. When Tyler left for college, I cried for 3 days straight. Not sad tears exactly. More like tears of transition, of letting go, of recognizing that a chapter was ending. My small apartment felt enormous without his presence, without his soccer gear in the hallway and his music playing from his room and his voice asking what was for dinner. But it also felt like a new beginning. For the first time in 18 years, I didn't have to think about anyone but myself. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I threw myself into the nonprofit work with my father. We met twice a week to discuss plans, to look at potential sites, to talk through the vision. It was strange working with him after so many years apart. Strange seeing him in this new role, humble and willing to learn instead of authoritarian and dismissive. But it was also healing in ways I hadn't expected. We were building something together, father and daughter, combining our different strengths to create something neither of us could have done alone. In October, my mother asked if I wanted to have lunch, just the two of us. We met at a small bistro near her house, and for the first time in my memory, we talked without the weight of my father's expectations hanging over us. She told me about her own dreams, the ones she'd set aside when she married my father. She'd wanted to be a teacher, she said. Elementary school. She'd loved working with children. But my father had needed a wife who could host clients, who could manage his household, who could be the perfect complement to his ambitions. So she'd set aside her own. I gave up too much, she admitted. I see that now. I let him define who I was supposed to be, and I lost myself in the process. It's not too late, I told her. Mom, you're 63. You could go back to school. You could volunteer. You could find a way to do what you love. She smiled, but it was sad. I think I'm too old to start over, Emma. You're not, I insisted. Look at Dad. He's 65 and he's completely changing his life. Look at me. I started over at 26 with nothing but a baby and a dream of something better. It's never too late to choose yourself. She reached across the table and took my hand. When did you get so wise? I learned from watching what not to do, I said gently. No offense. None taken, she said. You're right. I know you're right. I'm just scared. I know, I said. But I'll help you. Whatever you want to try, whatever makes you happy, I'll support you. 2 months later, my mother enrolled in a community college education program. She called me the day she got her acceptance letter, her voice bright with excitement I'd never heard before. I'm going back to school, she said. At 63 years old, I'm going back to school. I'm so proud of you, I told her. This is amazing. I'm terrified, she admitted, but also thrilled. Is that normal? Completely normal, I assured her. That's how you know you're doing something right. By November, my father and I had secured funding and a location for the first affordable housing project. It would take 2 years to complete, but when it was done, it would provide 40 units of housing with a community center on the ground floor, offering childcare, job training, and educational programs. We're really doing this, my father said one afternoon as we stood on the empty lot, looking at the architectural plans spread across a makeshift table. We're really doing this, I confirmed. He looked at me, and his eyes were bright with something that looked like joy. Thank you, Emma, for giving me this chance, for teaching me what matters, for not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. I didn't do it for you, I said honestly. I did it for me. Because holding on to anger was exhausting. Because I wanted to believe people could change. Because I wanted my son to see that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. But it does mean moving forward. He nodded. Fair enough. But thank you anyway. As winter settled over Seattle, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened since that terrible birthday dinner. In less than a year, my entire life had transformed. Not in the ways I'd expected, but in ways that mattered more. I had reconnected with my family, not in the superficial way we'd been connected before, but in a real, honest, sometimes uncomfortable way that felt authentic. My mother was pursuing her dreams for the first time in 4 decades. My father was learning what it meant to serve instead of command. Jennifer was starting to question the life she'd built and consider what she actually wanted. Even David, who still hadn't reached out directly, had apparently started therapy according to Jennifer. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. Tyler called me every Sunday from his dorm. He was thriving at university, loving his classes, making friends, volunteering with a local youth mentorship program. He'd found his people, other students who cared about making a difference, who valued compassion over competition. Every time we talked, I heard the confidence in his voice growing stronger. He was becoming exactly who he was meant to be, and I'd had a hand in that. That thought carried me through the lonely evenings in my quiet apartment. Christmas that year was different than any I'd experienced in decades. My father hosted, but it wasn't the formal, stiff affair I remembered from childhood. It was casual, warm, full of laughter and actual conversation instead of performance. Tyler came home from school, and the house felt alive in a way it never had before. My mother had baked cookies, something she claimed she hadn't done since I was a small child. Jennifer brought her new girlfriend, a woman named Andrea who worked as a social worker, and who immediately connected with Tyler over their shared passion for helping people. Even David showed up, quieter than usual, less combative, almost humble. We sat around the dining room table, the same one where my father had said those terrible words 6 months earlier, and ate a meal my mother had actually cooked herself instead of hiring caterers. My father raised his glass and everyone quieted. Last Christmas, he began, I had a family that looked perfect on the outside but was broken on the inside. I had children who showed up out of obligation, not love. I had a legacy built on buildings instead of relationships. This year, he continued, his voice thick with emotion, I have something real. I have a daughter who taught me what strength looks like. A grandson who reminds me every day what matters. A wife who's rediscovering herself. Children who are brave enough to be honest about their struggles. This isn't perfect, but it's real. And I'll take real over perfect any day. We clinked glasses, and I looked around the table at these complicated, flawed, trying people who were my family. They'd hurt me. Some of those wounds would never fully heal. But they were also trying to change, to grow, to be better. And that effort, that willingness to acknowledge their mistakes and work to repair the damage, that meant something. After dinner, my father pulled me aside into his study. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his desk drawer. He pulled out a worn leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. I've been writing in this since the night of my birthday dinner, he explained. Thoughts, reflections, apologies I wanted to say but didn't know how. I want you to have it. I don't need you to read it now or even ever. But I want you to know that I've been doing the work, Emma. Not just showing up and volunteering, but really examining my life, my choices, my failures as a father. I took the journal, feeling the weight of it in my hands. Thank you, I said. I'll read it when I'm ready. He nodded. There's no rush. I just wanted you to know that I see you. I see what you've accomplished, the life you've built, the man you've raised. And I'm sorry it took me 65 years to understand what you knew at 26. That success isn't about what you build with your hands. It's about who you become in the process. We stood in that study, surrounded by his architectural awards and framed photos of buildings he designed, and I realized something. He was finally seeing beyond the structures to the people they were meant to serve. He was finally understanding what I tried to tell him all those years ago, that we build buildings for people, not the other way around. January brought new beginnings. My mother started her student teaching placement at an elementary school and called me nearly every day with stories about her students, her voice bubbling with joy I'd never heard before. She'd found her purpose, the one she'd set aside decades ago, and watching her bloom at 63 was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever witnessed. Jennifer quit her job at Carter & Associates. She didn't have a plan, didn't know what came next, but she knew she couldn't keep building other people's dreams while ignoring her own. She moved to a smaller apartment, started painting again, something she'd loved in college but abandoned when she joined the family firm. Her paintings were raw and emotional, full of color and chaos and honest feeling. She was finding herself, messy and uncertain and real. The nonprofit my father and I had started was gaining traction. We'd secured additional funding from several foundations and had begun the permitting process for the housing project. We hired an executive director, a woman named Patricia Chun who'd spent 20 years working in affordable housing and community development. She brought expertise we didn't have, connections we needed, and a vision that aligned perfectly with what we were trying to build. My father deferred to her constantly, asking questions, taking notes, learning. It was strange seeing him in a subordinate role, stranger still seeing him embrace it with humility. In February, I got a call from a producer at a local news station. They'd heard about the community center, about the story of how it had been saved and expanded, about my father's transformation from corporate architect to community volunteer. They wanted to do a feature story. I almost said no. I didn't need attention or recognition. That had never been the point. But Patricia convinced me otherwise. Emma, she said, your story could inspire other people. Other families who are broken. Other parents who've made mistakes. Other daughters who've walked away and are wondering if healing is possible. You have the power to show people that change is real, that it's never too late, that choosing yourself doesn't mean you're selfish. So I agreed. The interview was harder than I expected. The reporter asked about the estrangement, about my father's cruel words at the dinner, about the years of silence. She asked how it felt to be rejected by my family, to rebuild alone, to hear my father say he wished I'd never been born. I answered honestly, my voice steady even though my hands shook. It broke something in me, I admitted. But it also freed me. Because I realized I'd been seeking validation from someone who couldn't give it to me. And once I stopped seeking it, once I started validating myself, I found a strength I didn't know I had. The reporter asked if I'd forgiven my father. I thought carefully before answering. Forgiveness is complicated, I said. It's not a single moment or decision. It's a process. Do I forgive him for the years of dismissing me, for rejecting me when I needed him most, for saying he wished I'd never been born? I'm working on it. Some days are easier than others. But I've chosen to move forward. I've chosen to build something new with him instead of staying trapped in what was broken. And that choice, that ongoing choice to try, that's my version of forgiveness. When the story aired in March, the response was overwhelming. Hundreds of emails poured in from people sharing their own stories of family estrangement, of choosing themselves over toxic relationships, of wondering if healing was possible. My father received letters too, some angry, accusing him of being a terrible father, but many more thanking him for showing that people could change, that it was never too late to acknowledge mistakes and try to repair damage. He read every single letter and responded to many of them personally. One woman wrote that she'd been estranged from her daughter for 15 years and had always blamed her daughter for being ungrateful. After watching our story, she said she realized she'd been the problem. She'd reached out to her daughter for the first time in over a decade. They were taking small steps toward reconciliation. My father kept that letter on his desk, and I'd sometimes catch him reading it with tears in his eyes. By April, construction had begun on the housing project. My father spent hours at the site, not as the lead architect. He'd handed that role to a younger colleague who specialized in sustainable community-focused design, but as a volunteer, helping where he could, learning from the crew, understanding the building process from a completely different perspective. One afternoon, I stopped by the site and found him talking to a group of future residents who'd been hired as part of the construction crew. He was explaining load-bearing walls to them, showing them how the building was designed to last, to serve, to create community. His face was animated in a way I remembered from childhood, when he'd been passionate about his work for the right reasons. After the group dispersed, I walked over to him. "You look happy," I observed. "I am," he said simply. "For the first time in I don't know how many years, I'm building something that matters. Not for clients or profit or legacy. For people who need it. For community. This is what architecture was supposed to be about all along." In May, Tyler came home for the summer. He'd completed his first year of college with a 4.0 GPA and had been selected for a competitive internship with a youth advocacy organization. He was confident, articulate, passionate about his work. Watching him, I felt a swell of pride so intense it almost hurt. One evening, we were cooking dinner together in my small kitchen when he said, "Mom, I need to tell you something." "Okay," I said, tensing slightly. He smiled. "It's good. Promise. I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened with Grandpa, about the dinner, about how you handled it all. And I realized something." "What's that?" I asked. "You saved my life," he said simply. "Not just by leaving when I was a baby, though that was huge, but by showing me every single day what it looks like to have integrity, to make hard choices, to value kindness over success. If I'd grown up in that family with those values, with that definition of what matters, I don't know who I'd be. But I know I wouldn't be happy." I felt tears prick my eyes. "You saved my life too," I told him. "You were my reason for everything, Tyler. You gave me purpose when I felt lost. You reminded me every day why I made the choices I did." We hugged in that tiny kitchen, and I thought about the scared 26-year-old girl who'd driven away from Charleston with a baby in the back seat and no plan except survival. I wished I could tell her that everything would turn out okay, that the pain would ease, that her son would grow into an incredible man, that her family would eventually come back, changed and humbled and trying, that she'd find peace and purpose and a life worth living. In June, we held a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the completed community center renovations. The space had been transformed, bright and welcoming, with new classrooms, a commercial kitchen for cooking classes, a technology lab, and a beautiful library filled with books donated by community members. Angela gave a speech thanking everyone who'd made it possible, but she spent most of her time talking about what the center meant to the neighborhood. "This isn't just a building," she said. "It's a promise that this community matters, that the people here matter, that everyone deserves access to resources and opportunities, and a safe place to grow." My father was asked to say a few words. He stood at the podium looking nervous, so different from the confident businessman who'd commanded rooms for decades. "A year and a half ago," he began, "I thought I knew what success looked like. I was wrong. Success isn't about profit margins or architectural awards or having your name on a building. Success is standing here today and knowing that this space will serve families for generations, that kids will learn here, that adults will find resources here, that community will be built here. That's success. And I'm grateful to my daughter for teaching me that." The crowd applauded, and I caught his eye across the room. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile, and I smiled back. We'd come so far from that terrible dinner. So far from the years of silence and hurt. We weren't perfect. Our relationship would probably always carry scars. But we were trying, and that meant everything. In July, my mother graduated from her certification program. At 64 years old, she walked across a stage to receive her teaching credential, and my father, Jennifer, Tyler, and I cheered louder than anyone. She'd done it. She'd chosen herself, pursued her dream, become the person she was meant to be all along. Watching her, I felt something settle in my chest. We'd both done it. We'd both escaped the roles we'd been assigned and created new ones for ourselves. Later, at the small celebration we held at my apartment, my mother pulled me aside. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for showing me it was possible, for not giving up on me even when I failed you as a mother, for giving me a second chance. You're doing the work," I told her. "That's all that matters." She squeezed my hand. "I love you, Emma. I should have said it more. I should have shown it better. But I love you and I'm so proud of you." "I love you too, Mom," I said, and meant it. In August, the affordable housing project was nearly complete. 40 families had been selected to move in, families who'd been struggling with housing insecurity, who'd been living in shelters or overcrowded apartments or their cars, families who needed a safe, stable place to call home. Patricia organized a community meeting so the future residents could meet each other, see their new homes, and learn about the programs that would be available in the community center on the ground floor. I attended with my father, watching as families toured the apartments, as children ran through the hallways with excitement, as parents cried with relief and gratitude. One woman approached us, a single mother with 3 kids. She shook my father's hand, then mine. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "You don't know what this means. My kids will have their own rooms. We'll have a safe neighborhood. I'll have access to childcare so I can finally finish my degree. You've given us hope." "We didn't do this alone," I told her gently. "This is what happens when a community comes together. When people decide that everyone deserves a chance. She hugged me, holding on tight, and whispered, "You've changed our lives." After she walked away, my father turned to me with tears streaming down his face. "This," he said. "This is what I was supposed to be doing all along." "I know," I said softly, "but you're doing it now. That's what matters." In September, Tyler returned to university for his second year. This time the goodbye was easier. I'd learned over the summer that I could build a life that was mine, that I could thrive even when he wasn't there. I'd started taking an online course in nonprofit management, thinking about how I could be more effective in the work I was doing. I joined a book club. I'd started hiking on weekends. I was learning who Emma Carter was when she wasn't just Tyler's mom or the daughter who left or the woman who defied her family. I was learning to be myself fully and completely for the first time in my life. One Saturday in October, I was volunteering at the community center when a teenage girl approached me. Her name was Maya, and she'd been coming to the center for about 6 months. She was quiet, guarded, clearly dealing with things she didn't want to talk about. "Miss Emma," she said hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, setting down the books I'd been organizing. "How did you know when it was time to leave?" she asked. Her eyes were serious, older than her 15 years. "Leave what?" I asked gently, though I had a feeling I knew. "My home," she said. "My family. Everyone says family is everything, that you should never give up on them. But what if staying is killing you? What if you can't breathe there?" My heart broke for her. I knelt down so we were eye level. "Can you tell me what's happening at home?" She told me about a father who was verbally abusive, constantly criticizing, tearing her down. About a mother who didn't intervene, who told Maya she was too sensitive, that she needed to toughen up. About siblings who joined in the mockery. About feeling invisible and worthless and trapped. I really listened, and when she finished I said carefully, "Maya, what you're describing sounds really painful. And I want you to know that it's not okay. You deserve to feel safe and valued in your home. But I'm worried about you. Are you in physical danger?" She shook her head. "He doesn't hit me. Just words." "Words can hurt just as much as physical violence," I told her. "Sometimes more because the scars are invisible. But Maya, you're 15. You can't just leave. We need to find you help, support, resources. Can I talk to Angela about this? Can we figure out how to make your situation better?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I just wanted to know I'm not crazy, that it's okay to feel like this." "You're not crazy," I said firmly. "Your feelings are valid. What's happening isn't your fault. And it's okay to want better for yourself." Over the next few months, we worked with Maya and her school counselor and a family therapist. It was complicated and messy, and there were no easy answers. But slowly, things began to improve. Her parents started therapy. Her mother began standing up for Maya instead of enabling the father's behavior. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One day in November, Maya came to the center and hugged me. "Things are better," she said. "Not great, but better. And I think they might keep getting better. Thank you for believing me. For not telling me I was overreacting. Thank you for seeing me. I'm proud of you," I told her. "For speaking up. For advocating for yourself. That takes incredible courage." She smiled, a real smile, and I saw a glimpse of who she could become when she wasn't weighed down by constant criticism. As I watched her walk away to join a group of her friends, I thought about that scared 26-year-old version of myself. About the 15-year-old Emma who'd felt invisible in her own family. About how the cycle of pain could be broken, one person at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of courage at a time. In December, the affordable housing project had its grand opening. Families had moved in over the past few months, and the community center was already bustling with activity. Cooking classes, job training programs, after-school tutoring, support groups. The space was alive with connection and hope. My father gave the opening remarks, and this time there was no nervousness. Just quiet confidence and genuine joy. 18 months ago, he said, I was invited to reimagine what success means. To understand that buildings are just structures unless they serve people. Unless they create community. Unless they change lives. This project represents that understanding. But more than that, it represents what's possible when we set aside ego and pride and listen to what our communities actually need. He gestured to the crowd, to the residents and volunteers and community partners who'd made it all possible. Thank you for teaching an old architect new tricks. Thank you for showing me what matters. And thank you especially to my daughter Emma, who had the courage to walk away from everything I built and create something far more valuable. A life of purpose and meaning and love. The crowd applauded and Tyler, standing beside me, squeezed my hand. You did this, Mom, he whispered. You changed everything. We did this, I corrected. All of us. Together. That night, my entire family gathered at my apartment for dinner. It was crowded, chaotic, full of laughter and conversation and love. My mother showed pictures from her first semester teaching. Jennifer talked about the art show where she'd be displaying her paintings next month. David, who'd been mostly quiet all evening, finally spoke up. I owe everyone an apology, he said. Especially you, Emma. I've been the worst version of myself for so long that I didn't even realize how toxic I'd become. I've started therapy. I'm working on understanding why I needed to put you down to feel good about myself. And I'm sorry. It's going to take time for me to change, but I want to try. I nodded, accepting the apology without making it easy for him. I appreciate that, David. Actions will mean more than words. But I'm glad you're doing the work. As midnight approached and everyone began to leave, my father lingered. He helped me clean up, washing dishes in comfortable silence. Finally, as he was putting on his coat to leave, he turned to me. Emma, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. Thank you. For not giving up on me. For showing me what really matters. For being exactly who you are, even when I tried to make you someone else. You saved my life. I didn't save your life, I said gently. You chose to change. That was all you. Maybe, he said. But you gave me the chance. You opened the door. And that made all the difference. After he left, I stood in my small apartment, surrounded by the remnants of the evening, and felt a peace so complete it brought tears to my eyes. I'd walked away from my father's world 18 months ago, broken and rejected, with his cruel words ringing in my ears. And I'd returned not because I needed his validation or his money or his approval, but because I'd finally understood that healing wasn't about them choosing me. It was about me choosing myself. And in choosing myself, in building a life of meaning and purpose and love, I'd given them a roadmap to do the same. The cycle of pain had been broken. The legacy of prioritizing achievement over connection, money over meaning, pride over love, that legacy had been dismantled and rebuilt. Into something new. Something real. Something that would last. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I thought about that dinner 18 months ago. About my father's words. About the laughter that followed. About the moment I stood up and placed that folder on the table. About everything that had happened since. If I could go back to that moment, would I change anything? Would I want him to never say those words? And I realized the answer was no. Because those words, as painful as they were, had been the catalyst for everything that followed. They'd freed me from seeking his approval. They'd shown me that I didn't need his validation to know my worth. They'd given me the clarity to set boundaries and demand better. And eventually, they'd created space for real healing to begin. My father had said he wished I'd never been born. But I'd been born. I'd survived. I'd thrived. I'd built a life that mattered. I'd raised a son who knew his worth. I'd helped countless people find their way. And in the end, I'd even helped my father find his. That was my legacy. Not buildings or bank accounts or achievements. But lives changed. People helped. Love chosen again and again, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. I climbed into bed and closed my eyes, grateful for the journey, grateful for the pain that had taught me strength, grateful for the rejection that had taught me self-worth, grateful for the family that had pushed me away and then slowly, carefully found their way back. Tomorrow I'd wake up and keep building. Keep helping. Keep choosing love and purpose and meaning. But tonight, I rested in the knowledge that I'd already won. Not because my family had apologized or changed or welcomed me back, but because I'd never stopped being exactly who I was meant to be. And that, I'd learned, was the only victory that truly mattered. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms painting the Seattle streets in shades of pink and white, and I found myself standing in front of a mirror trying on a dress I never thought I'd wear. It was simple, elegant, the color of champagne, and it was for an occasion I'd spent years believing would never happen. My mother was getting remarried. Not to my father, they'd quietly divorced over the winter after 40 years of marriage, a mutual decision that surprised no one who'd been watching their separate journeys of self-discovery. She was marrying Richard, a retired teacher she'd met in her certification program, a kind man with laugh lines around his eyes and a gentleness my father had never possessed. The wedding was small, held in the garden of the community center where my mother had been volunteering for the past year. She'd insisted on the location, saying it represented new beginnings and the power of choosing yourself, even when everyone thought it was too late. I stood beside her as her maid of honor, something that would have been unimaginable 2 years ago, and watched her face glow with a happiness I'd never seen before. She looked young, unburdened, free in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with finally living authentically. During the reception, she pulled me aside into the quiet of the library room. "Emma," she said, her hands holding mine tightly, "I need you to know something. Watching you walk away all those years ago, it terrified me. I thought you were making the biggest mistake of your life. But you weren't. I was. I was the one making mistakes every single day by staying silent, by not protecting you, by choosing his approval over your well-being." "Mom," I started, but she shook her head. "Let me finish. You showed me that it's never too late to choose differently. That staying in something broken doesn't make you loyal. It just makes you complicit. You taught me that courage looks like packing up your life and starting over, even when everyone tells you you're wrong. And because of that example, because of your strength, I'm standing here today as myself. Really, truly myself. For the first time in 4 decades. Thank you for that." We held each other and cried. Not sad tears, but the kind that come from releasing years of unspoken pain and finally understanding each other. When we rejoined the party, I saw my father standing awkwardly near the punch bowl, watching my mother dance with Richard. There was sadness in his eyes, but also something else. Acceptance. Maybe even relief. I walked over to him. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I am. It's strange seeing her so happy with someone else. But it's also right. We were never good together, not really. We were just good at pretending." He turned to look at me. "I'm proud of her. For having the courage to leave. For choosing happiness over staying in something comfortable but dead. I learned that from you too, you know. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away." I squeezed his shoulder. "You're learning. That's what counts." Over the summer, the nonprofit expanded beyond just the one housing project. We'd secured funding for 3 more developments across the city, each one designed with the same philosophy: affordable housing integrated with community resources, built with input from the people who'd actually be living there. My father had fully retired from Carter and Associates, handing the reins to a younger partner who shared his new vision for community-focused architecture. He spent his days working on the nonprofit projects, mentoring young architects, and volunteering at the original community center every Saturday without fail. One afternoon in July, we were reviewing plans for the newest development when he set down his pencil and looked at me seriously. "I've been thinking about something," he said. "I want to change the name of the nonprofit. Right now it's just the generic More Community Development Foundation. But I want it to mean something. I want it to reflect what we're actually doing." "What did you have in mind?" I asked. "The Emma Carter Foundation for Community Housing," he said. "You're the heart of this organization, Emma. Your values, your vision, your understanding of what communities need. This should carry your name, not mine." I felt my throat tighten. "Dad, I don't need that." "I know you don't," he said. "That's exactly why it should be yours. You've never asked for recognition. You've never needed credit. But I want people to know that this work, this model of putting people first, of building community along with buildings, that came from you. Please let me do this." I thought about it, about what it would mean to have my name on something so public, so permanent. Part of me wanted to refuse, to stay in the background like I always had. But another part recognized this for what it was. Not just an honor, but a statement. A declaration that the values I'd fought for, the life I'd chosen against all odds, they mattered. They were worth celebrating. "Okay," I said finally. "But only if we add something to the mission statement." "What's that?" he asked. "That we prioritize hiring and training people from the communities we serve. That we create pathways to employment in construction and property management and community development. That we don't just build for people, we build with them." "Done," he said immediately. "Absolutely done." The foundation launched under its new name in September, and the response was overwhelming. We received inquiries from other cities wanting to replicate our model. Foundations reached out with funding offers. Young architects contacted us wanting to learn this approach to community development. Tyler, now in his third year of university, did his field placement with us, working directly with residents to understand their needs and help shape programs. Watching him interview families, seeing him listen with the same careful attention I'd taught him, observing the way he treated everyone with dignity and respect regardless of their circumstances, I felt a surge of pride so intense it left me breathless. One evening after a long day at the newest housing site, Tyler and I grabbed dinner at a small Thai restaurant near campus. We were both exhausted but satisfied, the kind of tired that comes from meaningful work. Mom, Tyler said between bites of pad thai. I've been thinking about something. What's that? I asked. Everything that happened with Grandpa, with the family, with you leaving and rebuilding. I used to think it was this tragic story. Like, poor Mom had this terrible family and had to escape. But it's not a tragic story at all, is it? I set down my fork, curious where he was going with this. What do you mean? It's a story about transformation, he said. About how pain can be turned into purpose. About how the worst thing that ever happened to you, getting rejected by your family, actually freed you to become who you were meant to be. And not just you, but all of them too. Grandpa's doing the most meaningful work of his life now. Grandma finally pursued her dreams. Even Aunt Jennifer is figuring herself out. The rejection wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. I felt tears prick my eyes. When did you get so wise? He grinned. I had a pretty good teacher. We are not just talking about the family dynamics though. I'm talking about how you do everything. How you approach people. You never talk down to anyone. You never assume you know what's best. You listen. You ask questions. You create space for people to find their own answers. That's what I want to do with my life. That's the legacy I want to carry forward. That, I told him, voice thick with emotion, is the best thing anyone has ever said to me. In October, something unexpected happened. I received a letter from a woman named Susan Graham who lived across the country in Boston. She'd seen the news story about the foundation, about my estrangement from my family and eventual reconciliation. She wrote that she'd been estranged from her own daughter for 8 years after a similar situation. Her daughter had left an unhealthy marriage and Susan, like my father, had taken the husband's side, had blamed her daughter for breaking up the family. She'd said terrible things she regretted every day but didn't know how to take back. The news story had given her courage. She'd reached out to her daughter. They'd started talking. Slowly, carefully, they were rebuilding. And she wanted to thank me for sharing my story, for showing her that healing was possible, that it was never too late to acknowledge mistakes and try to repair them. I wrote back to Susan, encouraging her, offering what wisdom I'd gained from my own journey. We began corresponding regularly, and eventually I started a support group at the community center for families navigating estrangement and reconciliation. It met twice a month and quickly filled up with parents and adult children, all trying to find their way back to each other across years of hurt and silence. Facilitating those groups taught me something profound. Almost everyone in that room, whether they were the one who'd been rejected or the one who'd done the rejecting, carried the same burden. They all wanted to be seen, to be understood, to be loved for who they actually were instead of who they were supposed to be. And they'd all, in various ways, failed to offer that to each other. The path forward wasn't about determining who was right or wrong. It was about choosing to see each other as fully human, flawed and trying and worthy of grace. In November, Jennifer had her first art show. She'd rented a small gallery space and displayed 2 years' worth of paintings, bold abstract works that captured emotion in color and movement. The opening was packed with people, some who knew her from the architecture world, others who discovered her work through social media. I stood in front of one particular painting, an explosion of reds and oranges and deep purples that seemed to convey both rage and liberation. It was titled Breaking Free. Jennifer came to stand beside me. What do you think? She asked nervously. I think it's honest, I said. I think it's beautiful. I think it's brave. She let out a breath. I painted that one the week after I quit the firm. I was so angry at Dad, at myself, at all the years I'd wasted, but also so free. Like I could finally breathe. Shows, I told her. All of it. The anger and the freedom. That's what makes it powerful. We stood there together, two sisters who'd spent most of their lives as strangers, finally seeing each other clearly. Thank you, she said quietly, for showing me it was possible. For not hating me even when I gave you every reason to. I never hated you, I said honestly. I was hurt. I was angry. But I never hated you. You were just as trapped as I was. You just didn't realize it yet. By December, the foundation had completed 3 housing developments providing homes for over 100 families. We'd created jobs for 47 people from those communities, training them in construction, property management, and community organizing. We'd established scholarship programs, after-school initiatives, and support services. The model was working, proving that affordable housing wasn't just about buildings, but about creating comprehensive support systems that helped people thrive. At our annual gala fundraiser, a black tie event that felt surreal to be attending let alone helping to organize, we honored several residents who transformed their lives through the programs. Marcus spoke about going from a struggling high school student to a college graduate now working as a social worker. Sarah talked about going from a single mother barely surviving to a registered nurse giving back to her community. Maya, now 17 and preparing for college, shared how the community center had quite literally saved her life by showing her she deserved better and connecting her with resources to make her home situation safer. As I listened to them speak, I thought about that dinner 2 years ago, about my father's cruel words, about the laughter that had followed, about the moment I'd stood up and placed that folder on the table. All of it had led here, to this room full of people committed to making their communities better, to families who had safe homes, to children who had opportunities their parents never dreamed possible, to a father who'd finally learned what really mattered, to a family that had been shattered and was slowly and perfectly putting itself back together. My father gave the closing remarks, and his voice was steady and clear. 2 years ago, he said, "My daughter taught me the most important lesson of my life. That buildings are just wood and brick and steel unless they serve people. That success means nothing if it comes at the cost of your integrity, or your relationships or your soul. That it's never too late to change, to acknowledge your mistakes, to choose differently." He paused, looking directly at me. "Emma, you didn't just show me how to be a better architect or a better philanthropist. You showed me how to be a better human being. You showed me that strength looks like walking away from what's killing you, even when everyone tells you to stay. That courage looks like building a new life from nothing. That love looks like giving people chances they don't deserve, because you believe in who they can become. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for showing me what really matters." The room erupted in applause, and Tyler squeezed my hand from where he sat beside me. "You changed the world, Mom," he whispered. "Not the world," I whispered back. "Just our little corner of it. That's enough." As the evening wound down and people began to leave, I found myself alone for a moment on the venue's balcony, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The city glowed with lights, each one representing lives being lived, choices being made, stories unfolding. Somewhere out there were families like mine had been broken and hurting and stuck. Somewhere were daughters like I'd been, wondering if they'd ever be enough, if they'd ever be seen. Somewhere were fathers like mine had been building empires while missing what mattered most. And I hoped, desperately hoped, that some of them would find their way to a different ending. That they'd choose courage over comfort. That they'd choose authenticity over approval. That they'd choose to build lives that meant something instead of lives that just looked good from the outside. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find my father joining me on the balcony. "Beautiful view," he said. "It is," I agreed. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment before he spoke again. "I know I've said this before, Emma, but I need to say it one more time. I'm sorry. For everything. For the years I failed you. For the words I said that night. For not seeing you until you forced me to. I know I said simply, and I've forgiven you. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger was exhausting. Because I wanted to be free more than I wanted to be right." He nodded, accepting that. "You know what the strangest part of all this is," he said. "What's that? I'm happier now than I've ever been. I have less money, less prestige, less of everything I spent my life chasing. But I'm happier. Because I'm finally doing work that matters. Because I have real relationships instead of transactional ones. Because I can look at myself in the mirror and not feel hollow. That's what I wanted for you all along," I said. "Not the happiness that comes from achievement, but the happiness that comes from alignment. From knowing who you are and living accordingly. I wish I'd understood that sooner," he said quietly. "But I'm grateful I understand it now. We went back inside together, and I was immediately swept up in conversations and goodbyes, and the organized chaos of ending a successful event. But later that night, alone in my apartment with a cup of tea and the quiet satisfaction of a day well lived, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From that devastating dinner to this moment of peace and purpose, I'd traveled further than I ever imagined possible. I'd learned that family wasn't about biology or obligation but about who showed up, who did the work, who chose love even when it was hard. I'd learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing, but about releasing the weight of carrying someone else's mistakes. I'd learned that the opinions of people who didn't know your story, who didn't understand your journey, who didn't value your well-being, those opinions meant nothing. The only opinion that mattered was your own. And I'd learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you, the most painful rejection, the deepest wound, sometimes that becomes the catalyst for the most profound transformation. My father had wished I'd never been born, but I had been born. And I'd survived. And I'd built something beautiful from the ashes of that rejection. Not just for myself but for my son, for my community, and eventually for the family that had once cast me aside. That was my legacy. Not buildings or bank accounts or recognition, but lives changed. People helped. Love chosen again and again. Transformation modeled and witnessed and passed forward. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I felt a completeness I'd never experienced before. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. There would always be complicated dynamics, old wounds that ached, moments of frustration and hurt. But I was at peace with the journey, with the choices I'd made, with the woman I'd become. And that peace, I'd learned, was worth more than any amount of approval from people who'd never really known me. I closed my eyes and smiled, grateful for every difficult step that had led me here. Grateful for the strength I discovered I possessed. Grateful for the life I'd built on my own terms. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help, new chances to choose love and purpose and meaning. But tonight, I rested in the knowledge that I'd already won the only battle that truly mattered. The battle to be myself fully and unapologetically regardless of who approved. And in that victory, I'd found everything I'd ever needed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.